So this guy has one dream in his life. He basically wants to create the next Star Wars. Now his name is Lin, and Lin is actually a billionaire. He got rich creating online and mobile games in China, with his company's biggest game being the Game of Thrones game Winter is Coming. But one day, Lin decides he wants his gaming company to expand into making movies. So he goes out and he buys the rights to this sci-fi novel that's selling really well, called Three Body Problem. There's like a whole trilogy of them. They call it the Three Body series. But Lin and his company, he buys the rights, and he has a big vision for these novels. He wants to turn them into a massive global IP, and basically make them like the next Star Wars, with blockbuster movies and spin-off TV shows and spin-off video games. So he starts a new subsidiary company to handle this Three Body Problem material. And to run that company, he appoints this guy, Zhu. Zhu's a lawyer, and he's kind of an eccentric dude. So, for the next 3 years, Lin and his company, they try to adopt these books into a series of 6 movies. And he takes meeting after meeting after meeting. But, unfortunately, Hollywood just isn't quite feeling his idea. And old Zhu isn't doing a very good job running his subsidiary company for him. He's allegedly blowing through a lot of the company's money with very little to show for it. So Lin's Three Body Problem movies fail to get the green light in Hollywood. And this just crushes his dream of making the next Star Wars type global franchise. And Lin just isn't happy, and it looks like this thing is never gonna take off. So Lin actually has a working relationship with these two showrunners, the guys responsible for ruining Game of Thrones, the TV series. Because remember, Lin's company produced the Game of Thrones online video game, so they have a connection. So Lin asked the two showrunners, Benioff and Weiss, he asked them to come on board the Three Body Problem, and they do. And eventually, they all get a deal with Netflix to turn the Three Body Problem not into a bunch of movies, but into a long-form drama series, which for Lin, a Netflix series is a great place to start in his dream to turn this IP into the next big Star Wars type global franchise. So they take the deal, and finally, things are starting to go right for Lin. And so he goes to Zhu, who's doing a terrible job, and he demotes him from head of that subsidiary company, and he cuts his pay significantly, because, him. So Lin bumps him down and ends up replacing him with another executive. And Zhu still works there, he's just not at the top anymore. And because of this, Zhu is pissed. And that's when he starts plotting his revenge. Now, as I said before, Zhu is an eccentric guy, but he does have good taste in TV, because one of his favorite shows is Breaking Bad. And this show greatly inspires him in coming up with his revenge plot. So in true Walter White style, Zhu, he finds a place slightly outside of the city, and he starts building a secret lab. He goes out and he gets a bunch of chemistry equipment and literally dozens of cell phones, and he uses these rogue cell phones to access the dark web. And there, he buys a bunch of raw, toxic materials, because he's trying to mix the perfect poison. So every workday, Zhu shows up to his job, and he handles the menial tasks that he's trusted with just like he's supposed to. But then, after work, he secretly heads out to his lab. And there, he experiments with mixture after mixture, trying to get his formula just right. And he ends up experimenting with over 100 different types of poison. He even goes and tests these potions out on random pets that he's able to find in the area. But after months of experimenting, Zhu finally has the poison just right. And he starts spiking beverages and bringing them into the office to share with his coworkers. He also poisons some probiotic pills, and he gives them to Lin's secretary, who then gives them to Lin. And so far, Zhu's plan has worked perfectly, because after Lin takes the pills, he suddenly starts to feel sick. And he has no idea what's wrong. He just knows that he feels like shit. So they rush him to the hospital. And at the same time, 4 other employees at the company who drank Zhu's beverages, they also have to go to the hospital. And so the doctors, they look at all this, and they know Lin and his employees have all been poisoned, but they can't figure out by what. So they run test after test, and they get nowhere trying to figure this out. And soon, the police get involved, and they investigate. And pretty quickly, Zhu becomes the prime suspect. So police question Zhu, and he denies being a part of any of it. But based on what everyone has said, they're pretty sure it's him. And so they're basically like, just tell us what you poisoned them with so the doctors can save their lives. But Zhu still refuses to talk. He denies everything. And so 10 days go by, and he still hasn't admitted anything. But luckily, the 4 employees, they've started to recover. But not Lin. Lin, unfortunately, doesn't recover. In fact, Lin, he ends up dying right there in the hospital on Christmas Day. And he never got to see his dream of making Three Body Problem into this Star Wars-type global franchise come true. And so anyway, police arrest Zhu, and they eventually find his secret lab outside of the city, and they charge him with murder and all kinds of stuff, and they throw him in jail while he waits on his trial. And almost 4 years later, Three Body Problem gets made into a show, and it finally premieres on Netflix, meaning the first step of Lin's dream is coming true. And the day after that premiere, Zhu's trial ends, and he's found guilty of poisoning his boss, and he gets sentenced not to life, but to death. And it's worth noting that in the opening credits of Three Body Problem, they still credit Lin as executive producer.